The hot soup was dripping down my face, falling onto my new blouse that I had so carefully chosen this morning. Time seemed to slow down. I could see my mother-in-law's hands trembling, still clutching the empty bowl, my husband's eyes widening in horror, his sister's mouth frozen in a silent scream. "You've ruined my son's life, get out." These words, thrown with such fury, hung in the air filled with the smell of borscht and family secrets. We had gathered for the traditional Sunday lunch, as we had done every week for the past 3 years. Nothing foretold the storm. My mother-in-law was smiling, ladling her signature borscht into bowls. My husband was talking about his promotion at work, and I sat silently, clutching in my pocket an envelope with the results I had received yesterday. Results capable of destroying this fragile world of family well-being. I don't know what exactly provoked her. Perhaps my refusal of a second helping, perhaps an exchanged glance between my husband and me, or perhaps she somehow sensed with a sixth sense what I had been hiding these past weeks. What I had been hiding not only from her, but from her son as well. The silence rang in my ears as I slowly rose from the table. My husband moved toward me but froze when I raised my hand in a stopping gesture. In his eyes, I could read a question to which I had no simple answer. How do you explain to someone you love that sometimes love isn't the most important thing? How do you tell about the letters I had been hiding? About the calls I had been answering in whispers from the bathroom? I slowly wiped my face with a napkin and looked directly into my mother-in-law's eyes. This woman had never truly accepted me, but today there was something new in her gaze. Fear. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of the truth, which somehow she had sensed. "You don't even realize how right you are," I said quietly, taking an envelope from my pocket. I placed the envelope on the table, and it lay between us like a final frontier. No one dared to reach for it. My husband looked at me with confusion and anxiety, my mother-in-law, with poorly concealed triumph, as if all her suspicions had finally been confirmed. "Open it," I said to my husband. "I think you should be the first to know." His fingers trembled as he tore the paper. I watched his face change as he read, confusion, shock, pain, and finally, something resembling understanding. "What's in there?" My mother-in-law couldn't bear it any longer, trying to peek at the paper. My husband raised his eyes, filled with tears. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I didn't know how. I was afraid that you... that all of you..." I glanced around at the frozen relatives, "wouldn't understand." My mother-in-law snatched the paper from her son's hands and stared at it intently. Her face turned as white as the tablecloth on which borscht was dripping from my blouse. "Genetic incompatibility," she whispered, as if these words were burning her tongue. "Inability to have children." Yes, I finally managed to pronounce what I had been hiding for months. Andre and I will never be able to have children together. Our genes are so incompatible that any pregnancy would end in miscarriage or severe abnormalities. It's a rare case, 1 in a million. I turned to my husband. "For the past 3 months, I've been consulting with the best specialists. Looking for options. Calling clinics. That's why there were those strange calls and letters." My mother-in-law sank into a chair as if all the air had been let out of her. "So there won't be grandchildren," she stated rather than asked. "Not related by blood." I took a deep breath. "But there are other options. Surrogacy with donor eggs. Adoption. I've researched all possibilities." My husband stood up and came to me. His hands, embracing my shoulders, were warm and strong. "Why did you keep silent? We could have gone through this together." "I was afraid," I honestly admitted. "Afraid that this would be the end for you. That you would want children more than me." My mother-in-law looked at us, conflicting emotions battling in her eyes. She had always dreamed of grandchildren, of the continuation of the family line, of little copies of her son running around this house. "I still think you're not right for my son," she finally said, but her voice no longer carried its former conviction. "Mom," my husband spoke for the first time all evening, his voice firm. "You just spilled borscht on the woman I love. A woman who has been carrying a burden alone for months that not everyone could handle. And if someone should leave this table, it's definitely not her." I felt tears finally breaking through. Not from grief or offense, but from relief. The secret I had kept for so long was no longer my personal burden. André, I turned to my husband. You must understand that this is forever. No miracles will happen. He took my hands in his. Remember what I told you on our wedding day? That I choose you. Not some hypothetical family, not a lifestyle, but you. And nothing has changed now. My mother-in-law rose from the table. Her shoulders slumped, but there was still an unbending pride in her posture. I need to think about this, she said quietly. All of this is too unexpected. She headed toward the exit of the room, but stopped at the door and, without turning, added, and I'm sorry about the borscht. It was unworthy. When she left, silence hung in the room, but it was different now, not tense but contemplative. My husband's sister smiled at me awkwardly. You know, I've always wanted to be an aunt. And I absolutely don't care how exactly it happens. I nodded gratefully, feeling the weight of the past months gradually lifting. Ahead lay a long and challenging path, with many conversations and decisions. But most importantly, I was no longer alone on this journey. André and I returned home late in the evening. The entire drive home we were silent, but it was the comfortable silence of two people between whom an invisible wall had just collapsed. He held my hand tightly, releasing it only occasionally to shift gears. At home, the first thing I did was take off my ruined blouse. The borscht stains had spread in burgundy blotches, reminding me of the humiliation I had experienced. But strangely, I felt relief. As if along with the borscht, the burden of the secret I had carried for so long had been washed away. Why didn't you tell me earlier? André asked quietly, standing in the bathroom doorway while I tried to wash the stains out of my blouse. I raised my eyes to him, seeing his gaunt face in the mirror's reflection. Every day I was going to do it. Every evening I thought, today I will tell him. But then you would come home from work so happy, talking about your plans about the future. And I couldn't. I turned off the water and faced him. Remember how a month ago your mother was showing pictures of you as a little boy? How she said she couldn't wait to see your copy. And you looked at me with such hope. I just couldn't destroy all of that in that moment. André came closer and embraced me, burying his face in my hair. I don't know what will happen next, I whispered. Your mother. She'll have to accept it, he said firmly. Or learn to keep her thoughts to herself. That night we talked for a long time. I showed André all the materials I had gathered over these months, information about clinics, procedures, adoption. I told him about support groups I found online, about families facing similar problems. About how I cried in the doctor's office when I learned the diagnosis, and how I then decided to fight. You know what's strangest? I said, when dawn was already beginning to break outside the window. I kept thinking about how to tell you. I prepared a speech, imagined your reaction. But I never thought your mother would be the first to know, and that it would happen. Like this. André smiled faintly, stroking my hand. Perhaps it's better this way. Like ripping off a band-aid, quick and painful. The following weeks were difficult. My mother-in-law didn't call, and we didn't seek to meet with her either. André spoke with his father several times, who, as always, maintained a neutral position, trying to smooth over the rough edges. But we received unexpected support from his sister Moshe. She came to us with a huge stack of printouts about adoption and surrogacy. I've done some research, she announced as soon as she arrived. And I think I've found several options. That evening, the three of us sat on the living room floor, papers spread around us, discussing possibilities we hadn't even considered before. Moshe turned out to be surprisingly practical and businesslike. You know, she said as we were saying goodbye, Mom just needs time. She's old-fashioned, for her blood ties are everything. But she loves André, which means she'll learn to accept his choice. A month after the Borscht incident, as we began calling it, there was a knock at the door. My mother-in-law stood on the threshold with a small box in her hands. May I come in? She asked in an uncharacteristically quiet voice. I silently stepped aside, letting her into the apartment. Andrei came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel, and froze when he saw his mother. "I came to apologize," she said, looking somewhere between us. "What I did. It's unforgivable." She handed me a box. "This is a new blouse. I didn't know your size, but the saleswoman helped me choose. Of course, it won't replace the one I ruined, but—" I took the box, feeling a lump forming in my throat. Not because of the blouse, of course, but because this gesture meant much more than just compensation for a damaged item. "Thank you," I said, my voice sounding hoarse. "Please come in, we've just prepared some tea." During tea, my mother-in-law was unusually quiet. She listened as we talked about the options we were considering, occasionally nodding and asking questions. When Andrei mentioned the meeting at the adoption center that we had scheduled for next week, she suddenly said, "My friend Nina, do you remember her, Andriusha? They adopted a girl 30 years ago. She's a doctor now, by the way. And no one would ever say she wasn't their biological child, she looks so much like both of them." This wasn't enthusiastic approval, but for her it was a huge step. An acknowledgement that family isn't just about blood ties. When she was leaving, she awkwardly hugged me, for the first time in all the years we'd known each other. "I'm still getting used to the idea," she said quietly. "But I'll try to be better." 6 months later, Andrei and I were sitting in the office of the orphanage director in a neighboring town. The adoption process turned out to be long and complicated. Endless paperwork, inspections, interviews. But each step brought us closer to our goal. "We have a girl," said the director, an elderly woman with kind eyes. "She's 4 years old. She's been here since she was 2, her parents died in an accident, and there are no other relatives." She handed us a photograph. A serious girl with enormous brown eyes and dark curly hair looked back at us. She didn't resemble either me or Andrei at all. "Her name is Sonia," the director continued. "Very intelligent, but withdrawn. She needs special care." I glanced at Andrei. He was staring at the photograph intently, and then he raised his eyes to meet mine. There was so much love and determination in them that it took my breath away. "When can we meet her?" he asked, and I understood that our story was only just beginning. On the day when we first brought Sonia to Andrei's parents' house, I was more nervous than ever before. My mother-in-law had insisted on a family dinner, so that the girl could meet everyone at once. "Everything will be fine," Andrei whispered to me as we approached the door. Sonia held both of us tightly by the hands, looking around warily. Over the past months, she had begun to get used to us, but still regarded new people and places with caution. The door opened, and my mother-in-law stood on the threshold. She crouched down to be at the same level as Sonia and smiled gently. "Hello, Sonechka," she said. "I'm your grandmother Vera. And I'm so happy to see you." Sonia looked at her with her serious eyes, and then unexpectedly asked, "Do you have any books?" "In the orphanage, I had a book about a cat, but Marina took it when she was adopted." My mother-in-law beamed. "I have a whole shelf of books that your dad used to read. And you know what? There's also a book about a cat there. Would you like to see it?" Sonia nodded and, after hesitating for a second, extended her hand to my mother-in-law. They went into the house together, and I heard my mother-in-law saying, "And I also made borscht. Do you like borscht, Sonechka?" I felt Andrei squeeze my hand. We exchanged glances that conveyed the same thought. Maybe everything really would be all right. Life didn't become easier. Sonia had nightmares and tantrums, days when she refused to talk, and moments when she asked about her real parents. There were complications with documents, with kindergarten, with adapting to the new life, both for her and for us. But every evening, putting her to bed and listening to how she whispered to her teddy bear about the day that had passed, I understood that we had made the right choice. A year went by. Sonia started school, and this became a new challenge for all of us. On the very first day, she returned silent, with slumped shoulders. "What happened?" I asked, seating her at the table with tea and cookies. She remained silent for a long time, then quietly said, "The teacher asked everyone to talk about their family. When I said that you adopted me, Kirill laughed and said I wasn't a real daughter." I felt everything inside me tighten with pain and anger. Andre and I had tried so hard to prepare her for situations like this, but talking about it at home was one thing, and facing cruelty in reality was completely different. Sonia, I carefully took her hand, remember what we said about family? Family isn't just about blood. I know, she sniffled. It's when people love and care for each other. But other kids don't understand that. That evening, when Andre returned from work, we had a long discussion about what to do. He wanted to go to school immediately and demand a conversation with Kirill's parents, but I convinced him that this would only make the situation worse for Sonia. Instead, we decided to invite Sonia's entire class to her upcoming birthday party. We wanted the children to see that our family was real, even if it was created in a somewhat unusual way. Preparation for the celebration turned into a family affair. My mother-in-law insisted on baking the cake herself, no store-bought cakes for my granddaughter. My father-in-law took charge of decorating the garden, and Moshe took responsibility for organizing games and entertainment. The day before the party, I found Sonia sitting on the windowsill with a photograph in her hands. It was the only photo of her biological parents that we had managed to find, a young couple smiling, holding a tiny bundle in their arms. Do you think they would approve of my celebration? She asked, without raising her eyes. I sat down beside her, feeling my heart tighten with tenderness and pain. I'm sure they would be very happy that you have people who love you, who want to make your day special. She nodded, still looking at the photograph. May I put their photo on the table tomorrow, so they can be with us too? I'll translate this text into English while preserving its literary style and paragraph structure. Of course, I hugged her, feeling how her small body trustingly pressed against mine. This is your family. Your entire family. The birthday party went better than we could have hoped. The children were delighted with the games Moshe had invented, with the enormous chocolate cake, and with the presents. Sonia, tense at first, gradually relaxed and even laughed when they played hide-and-seek in the garden. I noticed how Kirill, the very boy who had hurt her feelings, was curiously examining the photograph of her parents that stood on the table among the treats. Are these your mom and dad? He asked. Sonia froze for a moment, and then firmly answered, these are my first mom and dad. They died. And now I have new ones. There they are, she pointed at Andre and me as we were setting the table. And also grandmother, grandfather, and Aunt Moshe. Kirill nodded thoughtfully. I only have a mom. Dad left when I was little. At that moment, I realized that behind his mockery, there might have been his own pain and insecurity. Sonia seemed to sense something too, because she simply said, would you like a piece of cake? Grandmother baked it especially for me. After the celebration, Sonia's relationships with her classmates noticeably improved. She began bringing friends home and started attending other children's birthday parties. Life was gradually getting back on track. One evening, when Andre and I were sitting in the kitchen after putting Sonia to bed, he suddenly said, you know, I've been thinking recently. Maybe we should consider having another child. I looked at him in surprise. Are you serious? He nodded. In the orphanage where we found Sonia, there are many children waiting for a family. And we already know how it works. All our documents are ready, we have the experience. I pondered. The past year had been challenging, but also incredibly happy. Sonia had completely changed our lives, filling them with new meaning. And the thought of giving a home to another child didn't seem so frightening anymore. Let's talk to Sonia first, I suggested. This will change her life too. The conversation with our daughter took place a few days later. We chose a moment after dinner, when she was relaxed and content. Sonia, Andre began, Mom and I wanted to ask your opinion about something important. She raised her serious gaze to us. What happened? Are we moving? No, nothing like that, I smiled. We were thinking. How would you feel about having a brother or sister? Her eyes widened. Do you want another child from the orphanage? We nodded, carefully watching her reaction. She pondered, fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. And will you love me just as much? Her question took my breath away. Andre immediately knelt down beside her chair. Sonia, listen. Love isn't a pie that needs to be divided into pieces. The more you love, the more love there is. We will never, ever love you any less. She studied his face, as if trying to find confirmation of his words. I always wanted a little sister, she finally said. In the orphanage, I had a friend named Anya, and we pretended we were sisters. So you don't mind? I asked, feeling the tension release. I don't mind, she smiled. But can I help choose? We laughed, and Andrei hugged her tightly. Of course. This will be our family decision. 3 months after this conversation, Anya joined our family, the very girl Sonia had talked about. She was 6 years old, a year younger than Sonia, and had spent almost her entire life in an orphanage. Unlike Sonia, she only remembered the orphanage and vaguely recalled some episodes from her life with her mother, who had given her up due to alcohol addiction. Anya was the complete opposite of Sonia, loud, active, constantly talking about something. From the very first day, she began calling us Mom and Dad, which initially caused some jealousy in Sonia. But gradually the girls found common ground, especially when they discovered their shared love for drawing. My mother-in-law, to my surprise, welcomed Anya with no less warmth than she had Sonia. She often took both girls to her place for weekends, taught them how to bake pies, and told stories about Andrei's life. You know, she said to me once while we were preparing dinner together as the girls played in the garden, I never thought I would be so happy with granddaughters who don't carry our blood. But when I look at them, I see so much of both of you. Not in their appearance, but in their gestures, words, and habits. They are becoming part of us, and we are becoming part of them. I silently embraced her, unable to express in words how much these words meant to me. Life with 2 children turned out to be even more chaotic, but also more fulfilling. There were arguments and reconciliations, tears and laughter, moments of despair and moments of such happiness that it took my breath away. One evening, when the girls were already asleep, Andrei and I were sitting in the living room, going through the drawings they had made at school. Sonia preferred to depict nature, trees, flowers, animals, while Anya drew people, always in bright colors with ear-to-ear smiles. Look, Andrei handed me one of Anya's drawings. It showed our family, 2 girls in the center, adults on the sides, and a large orange sun above them. She signed it. I pointed to the inscription at the bottom of the page. Anya, who had just learned to write, had carefully printed in block letters, "My real family." We both laughed at the spelling mistake, but I saw moisture in Andrei's eyes. You know, he said quietly, 5 years ago, when Mom made that scene about the borscht, I thought our life was falling apart. But now I look at all this and realize that day was the beginning of something real. I nestled against his shoulder, remembering our entire journey, from despair and fear to this moment of peace. Speaking of Mom, Andrei continued. She called today while you were at the store. She wants to take the girls to the country house for the entire summer vacation. All 3 months. I asked in surprise. Well, she said we can come over on weekends, he smiled. I think she just wants to be a real grandmother, with garden beds, homemade jam, and all that. I shook my head, not hiding my smile. Who would have thought that the woman who once considered me unworthy of her son because of my inability to give him biological children would now be fighting for the right to spend more time with our adopted daughters? Well, maybe it's a good idea, I said. We haven't had time just for the 2 of us in a long time. Andrei hugged me tighter. Remember how we dreamed of traveling? Before these 2 little bandits appeared in our lives. Italy, I closed my eyes dreamily. We've always wanted to go to Italy. Then it's settled, he kissed me on the temple. The girls go to Grandma's dacha, and we take time off and fly to Rome. Or Venice. Or wherever you want. In that moment, I felt such a wave of love and gratitude that I couldn't hold back tears. Andrei anxiously peered into my face. Hey, what happened? Nothing, I shook my head, smiling through tears. Sometimes I just think about how everything could have turned out differently. If you hadn't chosen me, but the possibility of having biological children instead. If your mother had insisted on her way. If only. But that didn't happen, he gently interrupted me. I chose you. And I continue to choose you every day. And the rest. The rest simply fell into place as it was meant to. That night, I lay awake for a long time, listening to Andrei's steady breathing beside me. My thoughts kept returning to that day when hot borscht streamed down my face, when I stood humiliated and crushed, convinced that everything was over. Who could have thought that this very moment would become the starting point for a completely new life? In the morning, I woke up to the sound of bright children's laughter. Anya, as usual, had climbed into our bed and was now tickling a sleepy Andrei, while he pretended to growl and tried to catch her. Sonia stood in the doorway, watching them with a smile. "Mom, are we having pancakes for breakfast today? You promised," she reminded me, noticing I was awake. Of course, I reached out to her, and she immediately slipped under the blanket, pressing against my side. "With jam or with honey?" "With Grandma's jam." Both girls answered in unison, and Andrei and I exchanged smiles. While I was preparing breakfast and the girls were setting the table, the doorbell rang. Andrei opened it, and I heard my mother-in-law's voice.
"Good morning."
I was thinking, since the girls are coming to stay with me for the whole summer, they'll need new summer clothes. Maybe we could go shopping today. A few minutes later, she was already sitting at our table, praising my pancakes and sharing her plans for the summer. Mushroom hunting, swimming in the lake, trips to the neighboring village for the fair. "And I've also enrolled the girls in an art school at the local community center," she announced. "They have an excellent teacher there, by the way." I listened to her, continuously amazed by the change that had occurred in this woman. Where had that haughty, cold mother-in-law gone, the one who saw me only as an incubator for continuing the family line? "Vera Pavlovna," I said, when the girls ran off to get dressed for their shopping trip, "I'm so grateful to you for everything you do for our girls." She looked at me with a long gaze, and then unexpectedly took my hand in hers. "You know, I was once a daughter-in-law too. And my mother-in-law. She didn't accept me for almost 10 years. She thought her son could have found someone better." She smiled sadly. "I swore to myself that I would never be like that with my son's wife. And look what happened. I became even worse." "You've changed," I said gently.
"That's what matters most."
"Yes," she nodded. "Thanks to you.
And the girls.
You taught me that family is something more than just blood ties." At that moment, Sonia and Anya burst into the kitchen, already dressed and ready to go out. Anya immediately climbed onto her mother-in-law's lap, while Sonia stood beside her, leaning against her shoulder. "Grandma, is it true that there are hedgehogs at the dacha?" asked Anya. "I've never seen a real hedgehog." "It's true," the mother-in-law embraced both girls. "And not just hedgehogs. There are squirrels, rabbits, and sometimes even foxes come by." Looking at this idyllic scene, I suddenly realized that I had completely let go of the past. All the grudges, all the fears, all the pain, all of it was left behind. Ahead was only the future, bright, filled with love and possibilities.
Summer flee by like a single day.
The girls indeed spent most of their vacation at grandmother's country house, while Andrei and I fulfilled our long-held dream, 2 weeks traveling through Italy. Rome, Florence, Venice. Each city was like a discovery, like a breath of fresh air.
Vivanda trug Narostritz, ate gelato, drank vine ins Mol Trattorias, and talked about everything under the sun, our past, present, and future.
On one of the last evenings, sitting on the terrace of a small restaurant overlooking the Grand Canal in Venice, Andrei suddenly said, "You know, I think we could take in another child." I looked at him in surprise.
"Are you serious?"
3 children is already a real kindergarten. He smiled, looking at the setting sun that was painting the water orange. "Do you remember the boy we saw at the orphanage when we were taking Anya? Sasha with cerebral palsy?" The director said his chances of finding a family were practically zero because of his diagnosis. I remembered. A thin boy about 8 years old, with intelligent eyes and mobility difficulties. He sat apart from the other children, immersed in a book, and didn't even raise his head when we walked by. "We haven't talked about it, but I often think about him," Andrei continued. "About the fact that he might never have what our girls have, a family, a home, a future." I felt a lump rising in my throat. It was so like Andrei, always thinking about those who have it hardest. It's a big responsibility, I said cautiously. He will need special care, rehabilitation, possibly homeschooling. I know, Andrei took my hand. And I'm not suggesting we decide this now. Just think about it. We have the resources, we have the experience. And I think Sonia and Anya will also learn a lot if a child with special needs joins our family. I looked at his face, illuminated by the soft evening light, and felt warmth growing inside me. This is the man, my husband, who once simply wanted an ordinary family with a couple of children, and now is ready to open his heart to a child whom everyone else has rejected. Let's go home first, I said, squeezing his hand. We'll talk to the girls, to your parents. And if everyone is ready, then yes, let's try. His smile was brighter than the Venetian sunset. We sat holding hands, dreaming of a future we had never planned, but which now seemed the only right one. Having returned to Russia, we didn't delay the conversation. We gathered a family council, the girls, Andrei's parents, and his sister Moshe. We explained the situation, told them about Sasha, about his diagnosis, and about our thoughts on possibly welcoming him into our family. The reactions varied. The girls asked practical questions. Would they still have their own room? Could Sasha play with them? Would he go to school? Moshe immediately offered her help. After all, she worked at a medical center and could arrange consultations with specialists. But my mother-in-law unexpectedly burst into tears. Vera Pavlovna, I said anxiously, if you think this is too much.
No, she shook her head, wiping away tears.
I'm not crying from grief. I just
am proud of you.
Of the people you've become.
Of what you taugt me.
She straightened up and resolutely added, if you're taking this boy, then I fully support you. And I'll help with everything I can. The process of completing the paperwork for Sasha took more time than it did with the girls. There were additional checks, consultations with doctors, and an assessment of our living conditions in terms of accessibility for a child with disabilities. We had to install a ramp at the entrance to the house, remodel the bathroom, and buy special furniture. But the most difficult part was gaining Sasha's trust. Unlike Anya, who called us mom and dad from the first day, he remained distant, polite but cold. He answered questions in monosyllables, showed no interest in the toys we brought, and was suspicious of any displays of affection. He's afraid to become attached, explained the orphanage psychologist. In his 8 years, he has already been on visiting terms with several families, but always returned. People aren't ready to take on such responsibility. We are ready, Andrei said firmly. We just need time. And we gave Sasha time. We came every day, read books to him, he turned out to be incredibly well-read for his age, told him about our family, about the girls, about grandmother and grandfather. Gradually, very slowly, he began to thaw. The turning point came when we first brought Sonia and Anya to meet him. I was worried, how this meeting would go, whether the children would find common ground. But I worried needlessly. Sonia, my serious, sensible Sonia, simply sat down next to Sasha and asked, "Do you like to draw? I can teach you." And Anya, without wasting time on conversation, laid out her collection of toy dinosaurs in front of him and began to tell him about each one, periodically correcting herself. No, this isn't a Tyrannosaurus, it's an Allosaurus, they look similar, but Allosaurus has longer arms. Sasha was initially taken aback by such fervor, but then I noticed how the corners of his lips quivered in a faint smile. And when Anya categorically declared, "You will be our brother, because we need a brother, and you need sisters," he didn't argue. On the day we finally brought Sasha home, it was raining. I remember how he sat in his wheelchair by the window of his room in the orphanage, looking at the gray sky, and seemed so small and lonely. "Ready?" asked Andrei, crouching down in front of him. Sasha nodded, clutching tighter to himself a tattered book, the only thing he wanted to take with him. "I don't know how to be a son," he suddenly said quietly. "I don't know how." His words took my breath away. Andrei gently placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "No one is born with this knowledge, Sasha. We all learn how to be parents, children, a family. We'll learn together, okay?" Sasha nodded again, and this time I noticed something new in his eyes. Not hope itself, but its shadow, a faint glimmer that we silently vowed to never let fade. The first months with Sasha were challenging. He needed time to get used to his new home, to the new routine, to the fact that he now had a family. There were nightmares, periods of withdrawal, moments when he refused to speak with us, retreating into his inner world. But there were small victories too. The first genuine smile when Anya showed him her drawing. The first time he allowed Sonia to help him with his homework. The first evening when he himself asked Andrei to read to him before bedtime. And then there was that day when he called me Mom for the first time. It happened in an ordinary way, without any special occasion. I was helping him with the exercises prescribed by the physiotherapist, and he suddenly said, "Thank you, Mom. It's much easier this way." I froze, afraid to scare the moment away, and he looked at me with his serious eyes and added, "You don't mind, do you? Sonia and Anya call you that." "Of course I don't mind," I struggled to hold back tears. "I'm very happy." He nodded, as if we had reached an important agreement, and returned to his exercises. And I thought about the long journey we had traveled, from that humiliating moment with the borscht to this quiet victory on an ordinary Tuesday. Life with 3 children, one of whom required special care, certainly wasn't easy. There were days when I collapsed from exhaustion, when it seemed I was being torn apart between work, home, children, their schools, activities, and doctors. There were moments of despair when I doubted my strength and abilities. But then evening would come, we would all gather for dinner, and I would look at our children, so different and yet so dear to me, and understand that I wouldn't trade this life for any other. Sonia, now a teenager, serious and responsible, helping the younger ones with their homework. Anya, still as energetic and noisy as ever, filling the house with her laughter and endless stories. And Sasha, our quiet, intelligent boy, slowly but surely blossoming in an atmosphere of love and acceptance. And next to me is Andrei, my husband, my partner, the man who once chose love over biological kinship and never regretted it. My mother-in-law, whom I now simply called Vera, became our main helper and support. She picked up the children after school when Andrei and I were delayed at work, helped with homework, and took Sasha to rehabilitation. She even took special courses to better understand his needs. "You know," she said to me once when we were cooking dinner together, "I always thought that being a grandmother meant simply spoiling grandchildren and sending them back to their parents. But it turned out to be a continuation of parenthood. Only with greater wisdom and less respons. Only with greater wisdom and less responsibility," she finished her sentence, stirring the vegetable stew. I smiled, looking at this woman who once seemed to me an insurmountable obstacle on the path to happiness, but now had become an irreplaceable part of our lives. "Vera, I never thought I would say this, but I'm grateful to fate for that day with the borscht." She raised surprised eyes to me. "Grateful? For the most shameful act of my life." "Exactly," I nodded. "If not for that day, who knows how much longer I would have kept silent about my diagnosis? How long would Andrei and I have lived in that suspended state? Perhaps we would never have dared to adopt, and Sonia, Anya, Sasha, they all would have remained without a family. And we without them." Vera thoughtfully looked out the window, where in the backyard Andrei was teaching Sasha to play chess, while the girls were passionately arguing about something, sitting on the swing. "You know what the irony is," she said quietly. "I always dreamed that my grandchildren would resemble Andrei. And look, Sonia inherited his seriousness and responsibility, Anya, his energy and optimism, and Sasha, his love for books and calm reasonableness. They don't carry his genes, but they are so similar to him. And to you." There was a deep truth in her words. Our children were indeed adopting our traits, our habits, our values, not through blood, but through daily interaction, through love and example. When Sasha turned 12, we decided to go ahead with a serious operation that could significantly improve his mobility. It was a frightening decision. Any surgical intervention carried risks, especially for a child with his special needs. The night before the operation, our whole family gathered in his hospital room. Sonia brought her drawings to decorate the dull hospital walls, Anya brought a whole stack of comics for recovery, Vera baked his favorite cookies, and Andrei brought a new book. "I'm scared," Sasha confessed when we were alone with him after everyone had left. "What if something goes wrong?" I sat on the edge of his bed, carefully taking his hand. It's normal to be afraid. We're all afraid. But you know what? Fear shouldn't stop us from trying to make life better. He nodded thoughtfully, and then unexpectedly asked, "Were you afraid when you decided to take me into your family? After all, I caused so much trouble." This question caught me off guard. I could have lied, said there were no doubts, but Sasha deserved honesty. "Yes," I admitted. "I was afraid. Afraid I wouldn't cope, wouldn't be able to give you everything you needed. But do you know what outweighed that fear?" "What?" "The thought that you deserve a family. That every child deserves a home, love and care. And that we are exactly the people who can give this to you." Sasha was silent for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Then he quietly said, "Thank you for not being afraid." The operation was successful, although recovery was long and difficult. But with each day, with each physiotherapy session, Sasha grew stronger. After 6 months, he took his first independent steps without support. Just a few from the bed to the table, but for us it was an enormous victory. On that day, we arranged a real celebration. Andrei bought a cake, Vera prepared a festive dinner, and the girls decorated the house with handmade posters full of congratulations. And Sasha, flushed with pride and embarrassment, walked those few steps again and again under our applause. "The next goal is to reach the school," he announced during dinner. "I want to go to school by myself in September, without the wheelchair." "That's very ambitious," Andrei said cautiously. "I don't want to upset you, but the doctors said that full recovery would take at least a year." "Then I'll work twice as hard," Sasha declared stubbornly, and at that moment he looked so much like Andrei with his determination that I couldn't hold back a smile. All summer, Sasha worked on his physical condition with a persistence that professional athletes could envy. Every morning, exercises during the day, sessions with the rehabilitation specialist, and in the evening, another session of exercises. We took turns helping him, Andrei before work, I after work, Vera during the day, and on weekends even the girls joined in the process, inventing games that made Sasha move. And on the first day of the school year, he did it. He walked from the car to his classroom independently, relying only on his cane. Slowly, with stops to rest, but on his own. I walked beside him, ready to catch him at any moment, but he managed. When we said goodbye at the classroom door, he suddenly hugged me, tightly as much as his strength allowed. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "For everything." And I understood that he was thanking me not just for supporting him through rehabilitation, but for everything, for the decision to take him into our family, for patience, for believing in him, for the love that we all gave him. The years went by, our children grew, changed, and found their own paths. Sonia, always serious and responsible, enrolled in medical school. She decided to become a pediatrician. Anya, creative and emotional, chose art school, dreaming of a career as an illustrator. And Sasha, our smart, thoughtful boy, became fascinated with programming and at just 16 created an application for people with disabilities that helped them find accessible routes in the city. Vera, now completely gray-haired but still as energetic as ever, continued to actively participate in her grandchildren's lives. She helped Sonia prepare for exams, admired Anya's drawings, and was the first to test all of Sasha's programs. One evening, when the children had already gone to their rooms, Andrei and I sat in the living room looking through old photographs. 20 years of marriage is a significant date, and we decided to create a photo album to mark this anniversary. "Look," Andrei handed me a yellowed photograph. "Our first meeting with Sonia." The photo captured a serious girl with enormous eyes, cautiously looking at us from behind the shoulder of the orphanage caretaker. "And here's Anya," I pulled out another photo. "Remember how she declared right from the doorstep that she wanted to live in a pink room?" We laughed, remembering how urgently we had to repaint the walls in the nursery to please our princess. "And this is Sasha." Andrei carefully took a photograph of a thin boy in a wheelchair. Who would have thought he would become the captain of the school chess team? We continued sorting through the photos, recalling all the stages of our journey. The children's first days in our home, their first successes and failures, holidays and ordinary days, moments of joy and sadness. "You know," Andrei said thoughtfully, "when we first got married, I imagined our life quite differently. A typical family, a couple of kids who looked like us, a calm, measured life. Do you regret it? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Not for a second, he squeezed my hand tightly. What we got instead of a normal life is worth 1,000 times more. Our children, each with their own story, their own character, their own peculiarities, they've taught me what biological children never could have. What's that? I smiled. That love is a choice. Every day, every minute, we choose to love each other, to support each other, to accept each other as we are. Not because we're connected by blood, but because we decided to be a family. I leaned against his shoulder, thinking about how far we'd come on this journey that began with that humiliating moment at the dinner table. Who would have thought that spilled borscht would become the starting point of a new, authentic life? You know what I sometimes think about? I asked quietly. How the biological parents of our children would react if they could see them now. Andrei nodded thoughtfully. Sonia's parents would probably be happy that she chose medicine. And Anya's mother. Who knows? Maybe she was also a creative soul. And Sasha's parents, I continued, they would be proud of his strength of spirit. How he never gives up. We fell silent, turning the pages of our family history. Here's Sonia receiving her diploma with honors, here's Anya with her first art exhibition, here's Sasha at the Paralympic swimming competition, which he joined after his full recovery. And here's Mom. Andrei pointed to a photograph where Vera stood surrounded by all 3 grandchildren at the country house. Who would have thought she would become such a grandmother? She has come a long way, I agreed. No less than we have ourselves. At that moment, Sasha peeked into the living room. At 16, he had grown almost as tall as Andrei, though he was still slender. What are you doing here? He asked, coming closer. Reminiscing about the past, Andrei replied, showing him the photographs. Preparing a surprise for the anniversary. Sasha sat down beside us, examining the pictures with interest. And what is this? He pointed to the worn envelope that I had placed among the photographs. I exchanged a glance with Andrei. This envelope with the genetic test results, which once changed our lives, I had kept all these years. Not as a reminder of pain, but as evidence of a turning point in our destiny. This is part of our story, I replied. Someday I'll tell you more about it. Sasha nodded, not insisting. He had always been sensitive to other people's boundaries. By the way, I wanted to ask. He hesitated a little. Can Misha come over this weekend? We're working on a new project. Misha was Sasha's best friend, just as passionate about programming. They met at a specialized camp for gifted children last summer and had been inseparable ever since. Of course, Andrei smiled. He can stay overnight if he wants to. Thank you, Sasha beamed. I'll go tell him. When he left, Andrei thoughtfully watched him go. Have you noticed how he changes around Misha? He becomes more open, more confident. I nodded. The friendship with Misha truly helped Sasha open up, find someone who shared his interests and didn't pay attention to his physical differences. They remind me of us at their age, I said with a smile. Just as passionate, ready to move mountains. Andrei put his arm around my shoulders. I just hope they won't have to go through what we went through. Who knows? I remarked philosophically. Maybe completely different challenges await them. The important thing is that they find the strength to overcome them together, like we did. The weekend flew by unnoticed. Misha indeed stayed overnight, and the whole house filled with the sounds of his and Sasha's animated discussions about some program codes that only the two of them could understand. Sonia came from her medical school dormitory with a stack of textbooks, which she studied diligently in her room, occasionally venturing to the kitchen for tea. Anya, as usual, occupied the entire dining table with her paints and tablet. She was working on illustrations for a children's book commissioned by a small publishing house. On Sunday evening, when Misha had already left and the children had dispersed to their rooms, Andrei and I sat in the kitchen, enjoying rare moments of quiet. I have news, he suddenly said, setting aside his cup of tea. I didn't want to mention it in front of the children until everything was certain. I tensed. There was some unusual note in his voice. What happened? Do you remember Elena Sergeyevna from the orphanage where we adopted Sasha? She called me last week. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. They have a boy, Andrei said quietly. Timur, 14 years old. He's been in the orphanage since he was 10, after his mother was deprived of parental rights due to alcoholism. All these years, he hoped she would regain her rights and come back for him. But recently she died and... He fell silent, looking at me with an expression I knew well. That's how he looked when he talked about Sonia, about Anya, about Sasha, before they became part of our family. Andrei, I began cautiously, you're not thinking. I know what you thought, he took my hand. 4 children is a lot. Sonia is almost independent now, but Anya and Sasha still need our attention. And Timur. He has a difficult personality, issues with trust, with studies. But. I knew there would be a but. But he has no one, Andrei said simply. Absolutely no one. And Elena Sergeyevna says that if we don't take him now, he'll likely remain in the system until he's 18, and then. You know what happens then to orphanage children without support. I knew. The statistics were disheartening. Many orphanage graduates couldn't adapt to independent life, fell in with bad crowds, turned to alcohol, ended up on the streets or in prison. I'm not asking you to decide right now, Andrei continued. Just. Let's at least meet him. Elena Sergeyevna suggests a guest arrangement for the weekends, to see how we all get along. I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to say that we had already done enough, that we needed to focus on the children we already had. But another part, the one that once decided to take Sonia, then Anya, then Sasha, this part already knew the answer. Okay, I said. Let's meet Timur. But first we need to talk to the children. Especially with Sasha. He'll have to share his room if Timur stays. Andrei's face lit up, and I realized he had already become attached to this boy whom he hadn't even seen. That's the kind of person he was. His heart had room for everyone who needed it. We scheduled the conversation with the children for the next evening, when everyone would be home. Sonia came from the university, Anya returned from her drawing classes, and Sasha finished his online programming lessons. We gathered in the living room, and I noticed the children exchanging worried glances. Such family councils usually meant something serious. We have news, Andrei began. And we want to discuss it with you, because it concerns the whole family. He told them about Timur, about the call from the orphanage, about the possibility of taking the boy for the weekend. The children listened attentively, without interrupting. What do you think about this? Asked Andrei, finishing his story. This is a decision we need to make together. Sonia spoke first, as always thoughtful. I think it's a good idea to meet him. But you should understand that a teenager with such experience might be difficult. I've studied child psychology, and the trauma of loss, especially at that age. We know, I gently interrupted her. That's exactly why we want to start with weekends, to see how everything goes. Anya, as emotional as always, exclaimed, I'm for it. I've always wanted a younger brother. Although he's not exactly younger, but still. Anya clapped her hands. I can show him all my favorite places in the city, and introduce him to my friends, and... Anya, I gently stopped her flow of enthusiasm. Let's get to know him first, okay? Timur might need some time to get used to us. She nodded, but sparks of anticipation still danced in her eyes. That's just how our Anya was, always ready to embrace something new with open arms. We all turned to Sasha. He sat silently, looking at his hands. Of all the children, his opinion was especially important to us. After all, he would most likely have to share a room with the new family member. Sasha? Andrei asked cautiously. What do you think? He raised his head, and I saw a complex mixture of emotions in his eyes. Uncertainty, concern, but also something else. Understanding? I remember what it's like, he finally said quietly. Being a teenager in an orphanage. Watching younger children get adopted and knowing that your chances decrease with each passing year. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I don't mind meeting him. And if he fits with us, and we with him, then I'm ready to share my room. We can rearrange the furniture so that each of us has our own space. I felt a lump rising in my throat. Our Sasha, who had always valued solitude, was willing to share his personal space for the sake of a boy he didn't even know. Thank you, Andrei put his hand on his son's shoulder. We really appreciate your opinion. So, is it decided? Asked Sonia. Are we inviting Timur for the weekend? Andrei and I exchanged glances and nodded. Yes, he said. I'll call Elena Sergeyevna tomorrow and arrange a meeting. That night I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, thinking about how our life would change with the arrival of another child. Timur was older than our children when they came to us. He already had formed character, habits, views on life. Would we be able to find the right approach to him? Would he be able to accept us as a family? Andrei, as if reading my thoughts, turned to me in the darkness. You're worried. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Yes, I admitted. Timur is already a teenager. It's a completely different story than with little ones. Remember how afraid we were when we decided to take Sasha? He asked quietly. His diagnosis, special needs, the necessity for rehabilitation. But we managed. All together. I nodded, though he could hardly see it in the darkness. It's just. I don't want to disappoint either him or our children. What if we can't give Timur what he needs? Andrei found my hand under the blanket and squeezed it tightly. We'll never know if we don't try. And besides, isn't that the meaning of family? To try together, even if you don't know for certain that it will work out. I smiled in the darkness. This was why I had loved this man all these years, for his ability to see simple truths where I made things complicated. You're right, I said, feeling the anxiety retreat. Let's try. The first meeting with Timur took place at the orphanage a week later. We decided to go just the two of us, Andrei and I, so as not to overwhelm the boy with meeting the entire family at once. Elena Sergeyevna met us in her office, still as energetic as ever, though there was more grey in her hair since we had taken Sasha. I'm very glad you responded, she said, shaking our hands. Timur is not an easy child. Smart, talented, but withdrawn. After his mother's death, he completely retreated into himself. Does he know about our visit? Andrei asked. Yes, I warned him. He agreed to the meeting, though without much enthusiasm. She sighed. You see, he no longer believes that someone might want to take him into their family. Too often he's been given hope, only to be disappointed. I felt my heart tighten. How many times had this boy hoped and been disappointed? First, waiting for years for his mother to get better and take him back, then possibly, dreaming of a foster family. We understand, I said. And we don't want to make promises we can't keep. First, we need to meet, to get to know each other. Elena Sergeyevna nodded and left the office to bring Timur. A few minutes later, the door opened, and a tall, thin teenager with dark hair and a wary look appeared on the threshold. Hello, Timur, Elena Sergeyevna gently nudged him forward. Meet Andrei Nikolaevich and Anna Mikhailovna. The boy nodded without raising his eyes. Hands in pockets, shoulders slumped. His entire posture spoke of unwillingness to be here. Hello, Timur. Andrei rose to meet him but didn't extend his hand, sensing the boy's tension. We're glad to meet you. Hello, Timur echoed, casting a quick glance at us before staring at the floor again. Elena Sergeyevna tactfully left us, saying she would be in the next room if needed. An awkward silence followed. I noticed that Timur's fingers, peeking out from his pockets, were stained with ink, as if he had been writing or drawing a lot. Timur, I began, trying to make my voice sound natural. Elena Sergeyevna told us that you're interested in drawing. Is that true? He shrugged, but still replied, sometimes I draw. Nothing special. Our daughter Anya is an artist too, I continued. She's currently working on illustrations for a children's book. This sparked his interest. He looked up, and I saw a glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. Really? What kind of book? Animal tales, I replied, happy to have found a topic that interested him. She specializes in animal art. And what do you prefer to draw? He closed up again, as if regretting the interest he had shown. Different things. Mostly people. Andrei, who had been silent until then, asked, besides drawing, what are you interested in? Sports, music, perhaps computers. Timur gave him an appraising look, as if deciding whether it was worth answering. I play guitar a little. And football with the guys. That's great, Andrew said sincerely. At your age, I was also into guitar, though I didn't show any particular talent. The conversation continued in the same vein. We asked questions, Timur answered briefly, without much desire to open up. But gradually I noticed that his posture became less tense, and his answers a bit more detailed. When it was time to say goodbye, Andrew asked directly, Timur, we would like to invite you to our place for the weekend. To introduce you to our children, show you our house. What do you say? The boy tensed up again, hiding his hands in his pockets. What for? He asked with unexpected directness. You need little children, not someone like me. His words struck me right in the heart. How many rejections had he heard? How many times had he seen potential parents choose younger, more affectionate, simpler children? Timur, I said softly, we have 3 children. Sonia is 21, she's studying medicine. Anya is 16, she's an artist, as I already mentioned. And Sasha is 16, he's into programming. Oh.